Tips up slightly in front of the chest, and then over time we'll begin to move them back in line with the chest. So you're going to push through the fingertips, push through the tops of the feet, and inhale, roll the spine up. And then exhale, she rolls down. So she'll just take a few rounds like this, and we use the inhales to create space and the exhales to land. The first thing you're seeing here most likely is her pressing the fingertips down. But the detail that you really want to be able to pick up on in your own practice, and we'll do this next one in slow motion, you'll notice that Carling starts, and as she pushes through the fingers, the shoulders lift, and then the bottom tip of the shoulder blade rolls onto the back more to pick up the chest, pick up the heart, and elevate the collarbones. Carling's not thinking about taking her head to her butt. She's thinking about taking the bottom rib cage towards the top of the mat. There's a dramatic difference in that train of thought, even if physically it doesn't look that different. So as she takes one more here, we lift, shoulders roll onto back, and it's as if the bottom tip of the shoulder blade again curves to pull you forward. And that's going to help you get deeper into the pose, and it's also going to help you create more length through the lower back, which is an area that we really want to make sure we take care of. To make the pose a bit more versatile, instead of just waving up and down, Carling also has the ability to wave in a circular, a figure eight, or more of a side-to-side motion. And so as you can see here, maybe she rises up the middle, but then she rolls a shoulder down, or she rolls up with one shoulder coming to the middle, other shoulder behind. So you're drawing these little figure eights with your body. And these are meant to be organic. As you notice, no one of these positions that Carling has done is symmetrical or the same as another one, and it's not trying to be. Instead, we're trying to begin to create an awareness to physical space, right? Because you may notice as you move through some of these areas, oh, that one part of the back is a bit stiffer today, or there's maybe a little bit of pain, or maybe there's a lot of movement in that space. And then how can we begin to emulate that movement or transition that movement into other parts of the body? Let's go ahead and sit back to child's pose, let you recover for a second. After back bending, one of the nice things that you can do is take a child's pose because it's a subtle flexion of the spine. You can also take an embryo pose with the knees together if you feel that you need more support. So especially in our expansion series, if you do a lot of the bigger variations of bow pose, strongly recommend having the knees in to support you. You want to create a structure at which you can rest upon, right? You want to have a comfortable bed as opposed to, sleeping on the floor all the time. From here, Carling will rise onto the shins, and we'll take something that we call circle camel. And when we work into our circle camel pose, you'll start in your traditional Ustrasana setup, so knees, shoulders, and hips all in a nice clean line. And then you're going to lead with one hand, follow, and then lead again. So Carling will start by reaching her right arm up, using the inhale, and then she's going to reach the right hand all the way back behind to find the right heel or the right low back, right rib cage area, whatever feels symmetrical and available to you. So for here, Carling will find the heel. Then on her next inhale, she'll reach the left arm up and over. The left hand will find the symmetrical point. So again, if you find the heel on one foot, you find the heel on the other, or low back or rib cage. Again, creating symmetry. The next inhale, Carling will reach her right hand up and bring the thumb to heart center. She'll exhale for a moment there, holding the space, and then inhale, drive the chest into the thumb to bring the left hand to center. So you want to have the second hand slightly delayed so you can fully embrace the position when you come back to center. And then we balance this out. Carling inhales to reach the left arm up. As she gets there, when the landing happens, you exhale to confirm the position. Then you inhale, right hand lands. Exhale, confirm the position. Inhale, left hand up into heart center. Exhale, confirms the position. Inhale, lift the chest. Right hand comes to meet left, and you find your balance. Sit to the heels. So one of the things you'll notice there for Carling with her long arms in relationship to her body, there isn't as much side bend required for her to get to the heel, right? It's not as necessary because of the proportions of her body. But for you, so for example, if Carling rises up, and you can just demonstrate this, see how much side bend you can get if you try and touch your left elbow towards your left heel, or even take your left hand behind your left foot. So notice that opening position, and this is probably a better shape for Carling to work through with her spinal mobility and her arm length, right? Whereas somebody with a more proportioned body, meaning that your wingspan and your height are roughly the same. Like, so for example, Carling's ape index is +4, meaning she's 5'4", but her wingspan is 5'8". You want to begin to play those proportions, and that's why a lot of these side body movements are really interesting, because when you're doing circle camel by yourself, if you're doing circle camel touching the heels, you're probably really not getting that much out of the pose because it's just there, right? You're just there, and then you're just there. So you want to give yourself the chance, okay, how can I incorporate a side bend into the equation? So if we go with the right hand, the fingers land, and notice how much bend she has here. So there's a really nice curve. And then as she inhales to reach the left arm up and over, now we're really getting a nice movement through the spine, and it's requiring more of her legs. And that's what is so important with a lot of these side body back bends. You can go ahead and rest for a second. When you're back bending or you're moving through any of these spinal opening or front body opening positions, depending on the way you perceive that, you want to be in a position that requires something of your legs. If you're in a position where your legs can be dormant, you're going to develop the pattern of inactivity, because our bodies, no matter how much you train, no matter how hard or dedicated you are, they're designed to be efficient, right? You can say that in a nice way, efficiency. You could also say lazy, right? And what I mean by that is your body's going to do just what it needs to get the job done. And because of that, we need to create an environment for your body to be as active as possible when we're in these places. And it's not just for working hard, it's actually so that you can be safe and supported as you continue to move through these shapes, and you can continue to grow in your own physical awareness of your body. All right. So that is our circle camel. We usually do about 2 rounds going both ways. So we'll take it in rhythm this time. Okay. And I want you to go at your own pace, right? So you'll use the inhales to open and the exhales to confirm. Right? And we like to use the word confirm. Just go for it. You're at your own rate. Because you're committing to yourself that you're in the pose. Right? I am here. I am present. I'm part of where I'm going. And I'm moving to the next place. If you rush from place to place, what ends up happening is there's no real commitment to where you are. And so it's as if you were never really there in the first place. And that's a bit of a metaphor for these circling back bends, right? We want to move through them, but we want to also be present and fully a part of the experience of flow. Perfect. Go ahead and sit to the heels. Take an opportunity to balance yourself out. So when you're trying this on your own, this is a great way to actually prepare for your full Ustrasana, or if you're doing any sort of transitioning from Ustrasana. So for example, camel to wheel is a transition we often like to teach and practice because it is a position that requires something of your legs. For example, if you've been to a lot of our workshops, you'll maybe notice that some people that can drop back actually have a bigger challenge with going from camel to Urdhva Dhanurasana, even though they have a beautiful drop back practice. And it's because of the way that the spine moves in the position. It requires a bit more of your legs because you are closer to the ground. To prepare us for our last circling back bend, which is actually my personal favorite one, which is circle wheel, we're going to do something that you're probably very familiar with, which is a pose known as wild thing or flip dog or Kamakrasana. Carling's going to start in her downward facing dog. So as she comes into her downward facing dog, again, just go ahead and flow, lift the right leg up, step it over and behind just so people can know the shape. Stepping the foot over, driving through the feet, reaching the right arm overhead towards the floor. Come around, land the right foot, and then switch your side when you feel ready. So again, a transition that we're all very familiar with. And in fact, even take one round where you come from side plank, because that's another common place where we move through this position. And you'll notice here, what may be different than what you've seen in a lot of other places is how much work Carling is doing in the legs. So she comes back to center. You can watch here as she goes from side plank. When the transition happens, the knees are bent. And the reason for that is the same thing as we're working on as we go from our circle wheel, right? We want to have the ability to drive through the legs as much as possible. Go ahead and come to a symmetrical place for a moment. For example, if Carling's legs were straight and then she stepped over and then pushed through the foot, right, from a side plank, there's not much that can really happen here, right? But if we take the moment to bend and then we drive, all of a sudden we get a lot more movement through the spine and we get the ability to move the rib cage and elevate the heart up towards the sky. Wild Thing is a very common transition. It's also the most common name for the pose. And so when we're working through a lot of these Wild Thing positions, what you want to do is create the space to use the legs. So let's set it up one more time and just go really slow. Taking it from your downward facing dog. To do this properly, you want to bend the knees, right? And then whatever way you're going to go, so if Carling is going to her, let's say your right, sounds good. She's going to roll to the outer edge of the right foot as she lifts the left leg up. By doing that at the same time, it forces her to bend the right knee. And then as the left foot lands, she can come into her full expression of the pose. And you notice because we get so much side body movement, we get a ton of support through the shoulder here. The right shoulder naturally wraps onto the back body and it allows her to push through the base of her thumb. As she gets that, the right rib cage spins up towards the sky and she can do whatever she wants with the left hand to support the body. Let's take that on the left side really quick. So she lifts the right leg, bends the left knee, rolls to the outer edge of the left foot, and sets the right toes down. Drives through the feet. And you guys could, let's rewind that really quick because you did that so perfectly. So from here, watch the left shoulder. As she rolls open, the left shoulder rolls onto the back. So she's recruiting the tricep, recruiting the bicep, trying to create a connection between the left arm, the lat, and the left rib cage to create space. And then the right arm is used for support if she was going towards full wheel or as a counterbalance. Go ahead and lower the knees down. Sit to the heels. So if you can't tell enough from the amount of times it's been repeated in this video, back bends are about your legs. Find ways to use the legs. And it's the same thing when you're in your traditional Urdhva Dhanurasana. It's not about stepping the feet as close to the hands as possible. It's about driving through the feet as much as possible to create the arch of the spine and move the shoulders just over the knuckles or like the middle part of the top of your hand. All right, let's be ready for the circle wheel. Okay, so Carling is going to come into her passive squat at the top of the mat. And this is in our continuity series, right? One of the closing last pieces of the practice. When we're working through the circle wheel, you may have not backbended from a squat before, but really, if you've played with Wild Thing, it's not terribly different. We just want to add a rhythm to it. And the rhythm is you start swaying side to side, right? So you begin to have the ability to place weight in either foot. And then when you begin to move towards your back bend, for example, if Carling is going to place her right hand back first, she sweeps around, lands the right hand, drives through the heels on the inhale, and then exhale, circles back to center. So why don't you take 4 of these total? We'll consider that to be 1, so you do 3 more. So she's really driving through the heels here. Inhaling to open, exhaling to close. And this is the same as your Wild Thing, right? It's really no different, except for that there's a rhythm to it, right? We're finding a flow going from place to place, helping you create elevation and movement. One of the common questions we get asked here is, do I need to keep my heels grounded? And the answer is no, not at all. But what you want to do if you rise onto your toes is make sure that you're getting a full extension through the hips. Okay, so if, for example, if Carling places her right hand back and she rises onto the toes, but she doesn't drive through the hips, we're not helping ourselves create any space here. Does that make sense? So if we want to get onto those toes, we want to lean the knees slightly more forward, and that allows a real good push through the hips. Okay, because that's what we're trying to emulate there. Is if you need to create space for yourself, that's just fine, but you need to be taking the action of rising onto the toes to create space, not rising onto the toes to eliminate space. Those are so what Carling just demonstrated is what we would call half circles. The next common question we get while Carling rests, because those are very tiring, and when you practice them at home, I'm sure you can tell, especially because in the full solar practice we do 10, is should I use my glutes and back bends? And the answer is definitely yes. How can we expect Carling to get a full extension, or you at home, a full extension of your hips if you're not using the main muscle that creates extension through the hips, right? The glutes are a main mover of the body, and we want to use them here to support our lower back, right? That's going to help you feel more strong, more stable, and more connected to your practice. When you are able to fully connect these movements, like for a full circle wheel, if you weren't using your glutes, the transition from right hand to left hand just wouldn't be possible in a healthy and sustainable way. Additionally, we don't see, while we do call this circle wheel because it's in reference to the yoga practice and the most familiar pose is Urdhva Dhanurasana, we don't consider the with both hands down here to be a true representation of your Urdhva Dhanurasana. It is a transition that is helping prepare you for a more full, more complete Urdhva Dhanurasana after the circle wheel. So if you notice in the continuity series, we do 10 circle wheels followed by 3 symmetrical back bends. And after the 10 circle wheels, once your body's recovered, you're very prepared for those 3 symmetrical back bends. That could be anything from TikToks and stand-ups to just full 7 breath holds of Setu Bandhasana or Urdhva Dhanurasana, bridge or wheel. So as Carling begins to flow from place to place here, you'll notice, and again, feel free to just go at your own pace, and for as many as feels comfortable for your legs, yes. There's no pause, right? As she lands one hand, she's always preparing to land the next hand. So as she did those 2 half circles, now we do a full circle. What ends up happening if you try and land both and pause for the wheel is you can get stuck, right? And that's not the aim of this at all. Additionally, see, and you start to pivot the hands too much. Additionally, what ends up happening if you plant the hands and you try and stop there is your hips dip, okay? And if you lose the extension of the hips, the momentum is going to stop, and you're taking the pose out of the legs and you're using the arms. We like to use the arms in this variation more as like measuring sticks or balancing poles or anything that would kind of help you. It's almost like a pole vault, if you will. Like it's helping get you from place to place, but they're not the driver of the equation, right? So as the legs make the movement, the hands are helping balance the movement, right? So we're creating a flow using the energy of the legs, sweeping from place to place, opening the body, and really getting as active and as aware as possible. And again, the more you get comfortable with this, you're trying to do 10 in a row. So 5 going to the right and 5 going to the left. And after that, your legs, as I'm sure yours are right now, are a little bit tired. And it feels good to take a rest. But again, there's so much side bending that goes on in these places, and it really helps you create more space in your back bends, and it also helps them become more sustainable because again, you're not working from the arms to the legs, you're working from the legs to the arms. Oftentimes, so for example, if Carling is to lay back to prepare for a classical Urdhva Dhanurasana, we as human beings are so connected to what we can see and what is right next to our face. So because Carling's hands are by her face and she can like see her elbows, you're most likely going to think push through hands first, then push through feet and just drive the hips up, right? And that creates an Urdhva Dhanurasana or a back bend that's moving forward towards the top of the mat. But in reality, we want to create a back bend that's really balanced and it's moving towards the back of the mat. In a sense, right? We want to be moving back to actually come into center. So the first thing we'd want to do here is kind of place the hands down, rise onto the top of the skull. And then from here, she'll create the back bend by wrapping the triceps up, driving the chest towards the elbows, lifting the shoulders, and then pulling the shins back towards the spine. And that allows Carling to walk closer if she wants to, but it really allows the back bend to already be created so she can push through the heels and then drive the hips up. And you notice here, so for example, if I'm adjusting the position, my hands are right behind the Achilles tendons, and she can drive down and just like pull against me subtly so that she is really working from the legs to create space. We see the yoga practice, feel free to lay there and just rest for a moment. We see the yoga practice as a very long-term experience. Like we both want to be able to practice for the rest of our lives. And so everything that we're thinking about is based on sustainability and availability. And by creating good body movement patterns, we'll be able to practice these poses and these transitions for a very long time.